So we're going to start here, and this is purely because when people get a no crank, no start, the first thing they go for is to jump start the car. Now, when people go to jump start the car, what they don't realize is how vulnerable these BMWs are to any kind of voltage surge onto them, which can literally damage the whole car and damage a lot of the modules. Now, this is the point you're meant to jump start the car from. But a lot of people decide, just go and get a set of jumper cables, pull it to the back of the battery in the boot. Little do they know that by doing that, you're going to end up damaging the DME, your CAS, and if you have an E70, E90 1 Series, is going to fry the FRM. I try and tell people all the time, do not jump start the car from the rear and do not use another car, because the other car does not and cannot control the voltage surge. The more they rev that car, the more they spin that alternator, the more power is going to be delivered to the car. There is no regulator to stop the amount of power that's being delivered. In turn, that's going to damage the modules the moment you go to click it to start it up. So you'll go to press the start button, the starter motor will go to engage. As soon as that engages, them jump leads have not come off the battery or not come off the terminals, which is then still delivering more voltage than it should to the car. Now, once the car is started, the alternator on these has basically a chip inside, which many of you guys know, which is a regulator, which will control the amount of voltage that the car needs to keep all the modules awake. What ends up happening is when you're jump starting a car, the amount of voltage coming from that car is overriding the chip on the alternator itself, the regulator chip, which then in turn is just delivering the amount of voltage it wants from the other car being jump started. That's why I always tell everyone, do not jump start with another car, because you'll end up frying the modules. When you want to jump start these, please use a proper jump pack. Do not use a car, and make sure you're always jumping from the terminals, because the damage is long lasting and can be very, very costly. Most people are going to go ahead and do that. When they start hearing click, 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 they instantly think their battery's gone. That's simply not the case. Now I'm going to explain to you what else it can be. Now, if you do come across a no crank, no start and you're getting clicking and it's not your battery and your battery's fine and you've gone and bought a new battery, it's still clicking, another overlooked problem is this, which is the starter motor. Now, I have replaced it on this car, but this is a very overlooked part, and I have explained this in one previous video as to why it's overlooked. But this right here is a starter solenoid. Now, these always go bad, as any electronics do. You can see it right there. That's the starter solenoid. And when this starter solenoid goes bad, this is linked on to a relay in the fuse box in the front on the cars. You'll probably see it's a black relay, which is, I believe, a 30G relay. That is actually responsible for communicating between the CAS and the starter solenoid. Now, that starter solenoid is there for an immobilizer protection. For instance, this will not kick in and allow the starter motor to start if there's an immobilizer fault on the car, and vice versa. If this goes out, it's not going to allow the car to start. These are very notorious for going out, and these are very overlooked. The starter solenoid, especially the wiring, can break down due to the heat and where the positioning is for the plug, especially if the harness has become brittle and starts cracking down there, because the wiring that connects onto this plug is only in a very thin sleeve of tubing, and that can come apart, or you might get a rodent in there or a rabbit that ends up chewing it and cutting off the power to the starter solenoid. Then people start overlooking things. If you are getting a clicking and no starting, I would strongly recommend to check the starter motor, because this is very, very overlooked. You could have just replaced it and the starter solenoid could have gone bad. It's very, very common for that to happen. If your starter motor is fine and you do replace the starter motor still clicking, then you want to check the relay, which is in the glove box area. You cannot miss it. There's only one. It's a big fat black relay, and it's a 30G relay. It sits in the fuse box there, and it gives power to this starter solenoid along to the CAS. That relay is there to usually protect this starter solenoid in the event that it don't go out, because as many of you guys know, it's critical that if this goes out, your car won't start. So of course it has to be there, but it's also linked onto the CAS. This is what the starter solenoid is for. It's actually to stop theft of the car and being able to bypass it so easily, to be able to start the car so easily. That's what the starter solenoid is there for, and it's actually linked to the CAS, to the fuse box. So do bear that in mind, that if you are getting a click in, it will be a starter as well, so do not overlook that problem. We'll move on to the next problem. It can be for a no crank, no start. The next one is up here. Now, many people overlook this, but it's a very common problem that the DMEs end up going out. The DMEs can end up getting water damage, causing your car to have a no crank, no start. It's very, very common, very overlooked problem on the BMWs, purely because water ends up getting inside, or they end up just getting condensated, which destroys the chips inside, destroys the whole ECU, which causes a no crank, no start. A lot of people overlook that, but there's a lot of codes which tell you and let you know if it's the DME. You'll still be able to scan the car and you'll know straight away if the DME is at fault or if it's anything else. Especially on the MSV70s, they're notorious for getting water damage, they're notorious for going out, and the MSV80s and so on and so on. There's a lot of different issues. BMW had a lot of ECU problems, and this is no different. If you are getting a no crank, no start, make sure to take out all this housing, open up your ECU box and take the ECU out, check all the pigtails that they don't have no condensation, any kind of ingress from water damage inside, and no water has got into the ECU. You won't be able to tell that unless you open up the ECU and be able to see the water damage, but most of the time they usually do damage and you will need to find a replacement ECU. I do have videos on my membership, however, showing you how to clone these ECUs. So if you do have that problem, you can then go into the membership and there's videos there showing you how to be able to clone that ECU. They're not hard at all, and literally the videos are there to help guide you on how to do that. Next one I want to talk about, which can cause a no crank, no start, is obviously fuel pump issues. If you've got a bad fuel pump, or you blow the fuse on the fuel pump, which many of you guys will know is very common, I've had the same thing when I had my M5, then this car is either going to run in reduced power or it's going to crank and not start. Because the simple thing being is if the fuel's been cut off or the fuel pump's not working and it's not engaging when the DME is requesting it to, it's not going to deliver the fuel to the injectors, therefore it's not going to start up. You'll have it start and then it will just keep cutting out like it's going to start, but it won't start. And that's from the fuel that was left in there previously. But once that fuel is drained out of the rail, then you'll know your fuel pump's actually gone. Therefore, you need to be checking your fuel pump. Easy diagnosis how to check your fuel pump is to get a scan tool and plug it up, and you can do a bidirectional control, which will let you activate the fuel pump to see if it's actually working. Secondly, on these BMWs mostly, you will be able to hear the fuel pump engaging when your key goes near it or when you first unlock the card. If you hear the fuel pump prime, which then means your fuel pump is fully working. If you don't hear that sound, it means your fuel pump is not working. Now the next one, the reason we are in here is because another one that will cause a no crank, no start is a bad key. If you have a bad key or a bad immobilizer chip inside, the car is definitely not going to crank and not start. And that's purely because the chip is needed to basically even put the ignition lights on and also to be able to start the car. If the chip is not activating this or it's not working, a lot of people end up dropping these keys, getting them through water, leaving them in their pocket, going through the washing machine. That's it. The chip is gone. It's not going to work. This links on with the CAS to be able to start the car. If the chip is not reading, you're not going to be able to start your car. That's why you see a lot of people running around with a skeleton key because they've damaged their main key. I do have videos, again, on the membership showing you how to make new keys if you do need to make a new one very, very easily. There's a lot of tools out there that can make them as well. It's just about knowing how to use the tool correctly to make your key without damaging or corrupting the files that's already on the module and losing all your data on the CAS module itself. But these can go bad along with the CAS module. There's many CAS modules that end up going bad, especially CAS 2. CAS 2 was notorious for going out, along with CAS 3. CAS 3 always seems to end up getting corrupted. A lot of people don't like them because BMW ended up upgrading them to stop thefts early on in the years, because cars were getting stolen and vice versa through keyless entry, especially on the E90s, M3s, anything with comfort access, they were getting stolen. So BMW ended up upgrading them by S2P to a later version, which made them hard to actually be able to, you have to be able to downgrade them to then make a key. CAS 3 is a big problem. So you guys, if you do have a CAS 3, they do go bad, they can go bad. And if the CAS does go bad, you'll simply know because the key won't allow it to be inserted. Because the moment this key is being inserted, there's a magnetic coil inside which reads and links onto the CAS. And if that coil, if you're seeing that your key was not press in and it's not holding the key in the fob reader, that means that your CAS is the big problem, because this is meant to be able to be inserted and be able to be taken in. And the CAS is meant to detect the magnetic coil inside the key, which then knows this is the correct key that links on with the CAS and the DME. If it doesn't do that, then you've got a problem. It's like if you put a wrong key in the ignition, it's going to give you a key symbol at the top where it's not reading the key properly. So do make sure if your key's not being taken in the key reader and it keeps ejecting it, or you just can't pull it in fully, then you've got a problem with your CAS itself. Next one on these is a battery. Now, the battery is critical for any BMW and all its modules. I tell people this all the time. If you have a cheap battery, please remove it. If you have just bought the car, please make sure to check your BMW to make sure there isn't a cheap battery fitted. Because a lot of the time people will fit a cheap battery from either a breaker's yard or just think they can bung in any kind of battery for these cars, and that's simply not the case. They think they can use like a small car's battery in these and it's going to be perfectly fine. It may be fine to start the car, but that's not enough power to actually run all the modules. Now, if you do get a no crank, no start, that's probably because the battery has been drained where the battery hasn't been registered. The battery isn't registered. The car doesn't know when to charge it and when not to charge it and how full it actually is from the get-go. And therefore, when you end up with a no crank, no start and you get no message on the dash telling you it's a battery, it's because it hasn't been registered. You need to be able to register these batteries for you to ever get a warning on your dash saying to you it's either the battery's low voltage, so you know when to charge it, or there's a high or a battery drain somewhere on the car as well. A lot of people do not do that, and that's why they end up with a lot of problems. Obviously, a dead battery is going to cause no crank, no start, or it's going to cause slow cranking. Now, my best advice is to always make sure you get the proper batteries for a BMW. You see, I always use a Bosch one in these, always, and I've always used the same size in all my BMWs, purely because I know these batteries are reliable, sturdy, and they're going for a long, long time. Same thing I've got on my 60. I replaced it 2 years ago, and it's still going strong to this day. And that's what I mean. It's all about getting the right battery, make sure you register it, and make sure you code it. If a battery is flat or the battery is not up to par with what your BMW wants, depending on what you've got fitted in the car, the more modules you got, the more quicker the battery is going to go. So I recommend to get the biggest battery you can for your BMW. Do not buy the smallest battery if you've got TV modules in there, this module in there, DAB module, that module, you know, comfort seats, heated seats, ventilated seats. Do not buy a small battery. The more stuff you've got on a BMW, you're going to need to upgrade the AH all the time, the amperage of the battery. If you've got only a very basic car, then you don't need to have a big battery with for your BMW. But if you have a lot of modules, a lot of different things that activate, because many people like to have all the gimmicks on their car, which is fine, then you need to have a big battery to be able to compensate for all them electronics upon startup. Because when all them electronics wake up, and it's going to take a lot of surge from the battery, because you've got to remember, the moment you press the ignition on before the car turns over and the alternator's running and taking over, the battery is using all the power, and to wake the car up, it's going to take a lot of power from the battery. So make sure you have a big enough battery for your correct car. You'll know that by either using ISTA. BMW usually state what battery was fitted with the car when it left the factory. Just make sure to buy the same one that BMW put in from the factory, and you can see that on your VIN decoder as well if you need to check what battery your car come with from the factory, purely for that reason. Like I said, do not fit any other battery apart from the one that BMW recommend, or a higher one that if you're feeling that the battery is draining too quick. But this is another overlooked problem, why the car won't start, purely because of the battery. The next one that can stop your car starting and causing no crank, no start is the IBS sensor. Now, a lot of people go around and just remove the IBS. I do not believe in removing the IBS sensor at all. Obviously, the IBS sensor is there for a reason, to obviously protect the battery and to obviously protect power surges in the car. Not only is it there to protect power surges, it's actually there as well to make sure that the battery is charged optimally by the DME and by the alternator. The DME can then tell when the battery is fully charged and stop it charging, so the alternator don't end up damaging the battery and damaging the battery cells. When a lot of people end up removing that, what ends up happening is the alternator doesn't know when to stop charging the battery, and then it will just kill your battery and its cells. Then that's why a lot of people are going through so many batteries. I do know on older cars, the IBS sensor was a very common problem. Again, on 03 and 05 cars, a lot of people like to just bypass it or take it off, but that doesn't solve the issue in turn. That's why a lot of these people end up with central electronics failure, because they start messing with all the stuff on the car itself instead of repairing the problem. But the IBS sensor is critical, and if that does fail, it will cause a no crank, no start. But them no crank and no start is for a reason. A lot of people seem to think, oh, just unplug it so the car starts. But in turn, what you're actually doing is causing more damage to the car, and you're causing more damage to the battery. A lot of people are not aware of that. The IBS sensor is there for a reason. It's there as well. It acts as an intelligent battery device for the whole car, to monitor the electronics, to monitor if something's wrong. That's why you always get a high battery power drain message. It monitors everything. It's there to shut off all the electronics in the event that something is not shutting off in the car, to obviously stop a fire or to stop something completely drain the battery. It's there for a lot of reasons that people do not understand. So do not disconnect that IBS sensor. The IBS sensor will not be the problem. If there's a problem, it lies elsewhere. The IBS sensor is actually just relaying the message to you, letting you know there is a problem somewhere. But the IBS sensor is not causing the problem. So do be aware of that before you start removing it and taking it off. That is not the problem. That's stopping you from starting the car because there is a problem.